thing that everyone loves to complain about, aside from the fact that Sony has been basically taking Bloodborne, as hostage, is the 30 frame lock. Because between the 30 frame lock and the frame dips. Now, as someone who loves playing Bloodborne, who plays Bloodborne all the time, these things are true. I'm not gonna lie about that. However, I believe that the 30 frame issue is a drop in the bucket of major fundamental problems that Bloodborne has, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute. Right? I don't have any script. I don't even have any notes. I'm rolling off the cuff here, and I'm just gonna edit this as it hopefully seamlessly flows from one point to the next. So I'm just gonna rapid fire points that I have off the top of my head. So first of all, we have the runes. We're talking, these effectively act like the rings in Dark Souls, or Demon Souls, whichever one you prefer, doesn't really matter. They all suck. They're all garbage. If you're not using, so you have the HP rune, then you have the stamina rune, then you have like a frenzy, poison resistance, stuff like that. The problem is these can be easily mitigated entirely. And they don't have nearly as much functionality as they do in Dark Souls. And the reason for that is because you don't have, like, the only poison weapon that you have, and you just throw them and be done with it. You have more reason to have fire resistance, you have more reason to use thunder resistance, because quite a few more enemies use it, but not really, and especially in the context of PvP, no one really uses, even in PvP, no one uses thunder paper or fire paper all that much, not really. And no one really uses, and there's no reason to have, bleed resistance either, considering Chikage is the only weapon that actually has bleed. Then you gotta consider, and then the Oath runes. The Oath runes all suck. They all suck, including the objectively best one, that is the Hunter of Hunters. That one's, the only reason why anyone uses that is because it's the closest thing to the Chloranthy rune. It's for the stamina regeneration. However, there's also a mechanic attached to this. This is gonna lead into the multiplayer. The mechanic for this is the Blood-Addled. And the way that this works is, to become Blood-Addled, there is a 5% chance that when you beckon, and a Hunter of Hunter comes into your world, if you're Blood-Addled, the Hunter of Hunter that you resonated with will have to kill the Beckoner. That is, you. The problem with this is, this 5% chance relies on the fact and the assumption that this player is an invader, like me, is gonna constantly be ringing their sinister resonant bell. And then beckoning. The problem with this is, this assumes that an invader is going to beckon, and as a dedicated invader who literally boots up Bloodborne just to invade, I don't beckon often, if at all. I don't beckon often, if at all. That's hardly ever happened. So basically, the only reason why anyone would use the Hunter of Hunter rune is just for the stamina regeneration and nothing else. But you also have the Vile Blood rune. Which has HP regeneration up to a certain threshold, and then it just stops entirely. But you also have the added bonus of the Vile Blood Registry, which is hacked, and there's no reason to worry about that, and the extra insight bonus. Unfortunately, if you really want to, the way that you would get the Blood Dregs act like a madman's knowledge for every time that you kill a hunter enemy or another player. The problem with that is, if you really want to do some insight grinding, you can just go to the Marrow Chalice and just grind that out. You get, I think, and I'm just estimating here, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I know for a fact you get 1 insight just for entering the boss room, and maybe 2 insight for actually killing the boss, right? And there's 3 bosses in the Marrow Chalice, so on average, you're gonna get about 9 insight, maybe. The numbers aren't exactly fixed, right? And you can do that, grind that out in about 9 insight in about 10 minutes. It's not perfect, it's not optimal, but it works. But you can do that routinely. You can regenerate those bosses as many times as you want. Unlike the hunter enemies, where there's only a fixed amount in the entire game cycle, and that's just assuming that you don't have PS Plus. That's assuming that you're not invading, like I would. Then on top of the Vile Blood rune, you have the Executioner rune, the Radiance rune, which, if the two come into contact, if they cooperate with each other, they have to fight. The problem with this is the Radiance Rune is also garbage because it boosts healing. It only boosts healing by a measly 2% and nothing else. So that now, because most of the runes suck, there's a massive imbalance. There's a massive imbalance of players that are taking on certain roles. And then I'd say that the only consistent amount that I've ever seen are probably the Confederates. That is the Cooperation Covenant, and even then, that also sucks. That also sucks because you only get like five extra percent of 5% of extra HP when you're cooperating with another player. So when you're in like human form and then phantom form, when you're in phantom form, you lose a bit of your total HP as you would in human form. With the Confederate rune, you get 5% of what you would have had. Your total HP of what you would have had. So, I mean, yeah, even then you get your vermin when you win. Everyone gets their vermin. Except, again, that's only for the Confederate registry, and that, if I recall, is also hacked. So there's really no reason to use it outside of just a sheer disrespect item. Which, I guess, I do use occasionally. Now, here's another problem. We also have the fact that as I'm getting to, the entire multiplayer system is just garbage. It's imbalanced, it's a mess from beginning to end. It needs to be revamped. Because getting back to the Hunter of Hunters for a second, why on earth is I don't understand why indictments and invasions are used interchangeably. Because an indictment is supposed to allow a player to just dispense justice. That is players an indictment is supposed to be invading the guilty. That's players like me. I go out and I hunt down John Darksoul. However, the Hunter of Hunter, or the Blades of the Dark Moon, the Blue Hunters from Elden Ring, or the Blue Sentinels, right? These guys are supposed to be protecting John Darksoul, and they're also supposed to be hunting down XX, Bloodspiller XX. I don't care. It doesn't really matter, right? So you would think that because they're legalized invasions, that indictments would be given more leeway than invaders would. So, for example, the Hunter of Hunters would need their own bell entirely for them to properly function, and invaders would need to be able to be indicted in most areas where they would typically be able to beckon or do multiplayer stuff, right? But they would have to be able to be invaded while solo. That's the key point here. Invaders have more issues to deal with than John Darksoul would. That is your average host, or Kevin's, or whatever it is. Then we need to consider the Chalice dungeons, right? That's a mess. It's a mess. Why do we need two? I get the fact that they're trying to do like regenerating stuff, regenerating. What is it? Like randomly generated stuff. They want to do randomly generated stuff for the Chalice dungeons that we're constantly doing more stuff, and there's reason to do the Chalice dungeons. That is for better blood gems. That's fine, I guess. You're able to invade in root chalices. That's the keyword here. Root chalices. You're able to invade. You're able to beckon, and you're able to do all this stuff from like the short root chalice, like the short root altar or whatever. That's where you can basically do whatever it is that you want. The problem that we're having here is you can't do any of that with the main chalices, and you cannot invade main chalices. And the problem I have with that is one that is the only reason why anyone even does the root chalices. The only reason why anyone does the main chalices is because they're trying to reach the queen. They're trying to get their platinum trophy, and there's no one to stop them. There's really no one to stop them outside of, God forbid, the cursed amygdala. Then we got the obvious stuff, which everyone would care more about. You have the lack of a warp function. You have the lack of a rest function at each individual lamp. You have the lack of, your items just straight up not replenishing when you go into the Hunter stream. Then you have the fact that, there's covenants that should be there, and there's fertile ground to do so, but they just don't. They just straight up don't exist. Like, you have Durja. I feel like, so, you can't be invaded, at levels 29 and below. However, but exceptions to get people used to invasions would be Old Yarnum. Like Old Yarnum, because they're like level 15 or something like that when they get, or level 20, when they first reach Old Yarnum. That would make sense. You're trespassing into Dirge's territory, and so other players would show up and kind of rough them up a little bit. This gets them used to PvP in a controlled environment. That way, they're not that way. By the time they leave and go on to like the Cathedral Ward, we're all golden. We're all good to go. And then you have the Church Assassin in the DLC that you'd think would be a perfect environment for PvP, like Invasion Zone. That's just not there. That's just not there at all. Then you got to consider what else. Then you also have the sheer lack of hunter tools that you would. I get the fact that Bloodborne is a much more melee-focused game, and that's fine. However, the hunter tools don't. They're not really all that good, if I'm being honest. They're like, you don't have. Like, they don't have, like, the choir bell is not that useful. Actually, that's not entirely true. There's one very niche use for the choir bell, and it's the fact that the choir bell, you're not typically flinched with, like, spray, like the flame sprayer or the rosmarinus, so you can heal, not be flinched. You can also heal while being hit with the numbing mist. You can use the choir bell, and it just ignores the numbing mist entirely. I didn't know this was a thing, courtesy of Scorched Knight for pointing this out. I thought I was screwed. However, the problem is, a lot of them are pretty niche, and not really I realize that most of this is in regards to PvP. If it wasn't obvious already, I'm very PvP minded, and everything is like, when I say that most things suck, it's like in regards to PvP, so I apologize for that. So, but then you got, alright, but point is, there's not a lot of variety, and there could be a whole lot more that the arcane, like, a lot of the lore for Bloodborne, there's a whole lot more that you can do with Bloodborne's arcane tools, considering there's a lot of lore, like, almost everything in Bloodborne happened as a result of, like, researching the arcane, seeking the Eldritch Truth. You'd think there would be a whole lot more emphasis on this, you'd think that there'd be a whole lot more hunter tools lying around, but there simply isn't, and that to me is pretty disappointing. Then you also have to consider, so we have this other problem that's concerning the matchmaking, concerning the blood gems, and the actual weapon level. And the reason why this is a concern is both those who care about, like, the difficulty of the PvE, and something that I feel like everyone's going to be far more concerned about is the prospect of twinking. That is being way stronger than the intended level, right? And this, and as someone who's been on the receiving end, this can backfire very easily. Now, I get that. Now, as to why people twink or all that jazz isn't exactly the subject of debate. We can talk at length as to why that is, but I don't have time for that. The problem is, the fundamental issue is that the fundamental thing that it is a problem, and it's going to be a deterrent for other players. And it hasn't been, and I'd say that it hasn't been near it. That twinking in and of itself has been greatly pulled back in later installments, but not at all in Bloodborne. Not at all in Bloodborne. Okay, so like. That's pretty much everything I can think of off the top of my head. I apologize if this was a bit scatterbrained, and if there's a whole lot more things that I missed. I'm flying off the cuff here, and if you want to hear me ramble about online stuff, I am more than happy to do that. I got no one else to talk to, and I got nothing to do right now. So, happy 10 years. Hope that was a sobering realization that 30 frames is an issue, I will say, is an issue. And the inconsistent 30 frames is even more of an issue. But there are more things to talk about than... My problem isn't the fact that people are talking about the 30 frames. The problem that I'm having is that they're only talking about the 30 frames. And there are a whole lot more issues. There are a lot more issues than just the 30 frames. Alright, peace. Okay, so one last thing. I cannot believe that in all my rambling about Covenants, I forgot to mention this one thing. There are basically next to no Covenant rewards. And that would be the determining factor of what encourages other players to even try out these other Covenants, bad as the runes may be. So, which means, without these Covenant rewards to kind of stabilize or stimulate the online economy, there's also the problem of everyone is just going to default to the Hunter of Hunter runes or the Confederate rune. Okay, that's everything. That's it.